This is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and here's something I wish we could do more often. We don't always have our review units in-house for long-term, but Dell is kind enough to let us hold on to our review loaners of the XPS 13 and 15 for quite some time. So we have a 6 months later look at the Dell XPS 15. Now we had both the touch and the non-touch models. That means the 4K and the 1080p models in-house. We still have the 1080p model right here. And much like Surface Book, you know, this was a bit of a chucky when it first came out. The drivers were, oh, my word, you know, those Intel display driver crashes, it wasn't just Surface Book. Those of you who own a Surface Book and were wondering, it happened to the XPS 15 and to the latest generation XPS 13 as well. It was Intel Skylake plus Intel drivers for their video. Imagine that integrated video. That were actually a lot of the problem. But there were other things too. One of the first machines to use PCIe SSD drives. Oh, same thing's true for Surface Book too. And there were driver issues there. Performance numbers and benchmarks weren't quite there. One of the things that happened right out of the box with this machine was it couldn't find its own SSD. I was like, rebooted it, found it again. There were a lot of BIOS updates from Dell, a lot of firmware updates. Sometimes they actually broke other things, support for their various Thunderbolt docks. The dongle adapter here kept working, thankfully. So it took about 3 months for them to get everything ironed out. So I know some of you might have tried one and then been scared off, or you read forums where people always love to go and complain and said, maybe this isn't the machine for me. Things have improved a lot. Let me just say that really, yeah, it took about 3 months for them to get it right. So the last display driver crash I had was in April. So the update there took care of it. I haven't seen it since, and that was just for Intel HD graphics, not the NVIDIA dedicated graphics are in here. Those drivers were spotless. NVIDIA always does a good job there. My SSD has not disappeared. Good times. Nobody wants to see that error message. All of Dell's little accessories now, in fact, do work as they were playing with the Thunderbolt 3 drivers. Let's talk about Thunderbolt 3, though, because that was a big thing when it came out, wasn't it? Everybody wanted that Thunderbolt 3 thing and USB-C 3.1. Well, here we are 6 months later, and there's hardly any Thunderbolt 3 accessories still. So is it a big motivator if I was going to go out and buy a laptop to have Thunderbolt 3? Probably not so much just yet. USB-C stuff, sure, there are dongles and adapters, and part of life with the XPS 15 and the 13 even are making use of these because they cut back on the number of standard ports, particularly the mini display port that I like a lot for high-resolution 4K monitors. The Razer Core, I know you're all excited about that. I'm less excited now that I found out it's $500 just for the enclosure, but Razer has said it's going to work with their Razer laptops. Will it work with the Dell XPS 15? I bet Dell works on it and tries to get it going, but Razer has said that it took a lot of special driver work between Intel and NVIDIA and so on. And AMD, in case you want to use an AMD external graphics card. There must be somebody out there who's still interested in AMD cards. Anyway, we don't know if it's going to work, and that would be the most exciting peripheral, albeit expensive. That would let you use a desktop graphics card with this. Much like Alienware and their graphics amplifier, which uses a proprietary connector, but the Alienware graphics amplifier is a lot cheaper. Street price is at $199. So if I was a hardcore gamer looking for something, I would probably go with the Alienware and the external graphics amplifier made for Alienware, or a big old gaming laptop, maybe. Speaking of big old gaming laptops, that's what this is not. That's one of the things I like about this. It's pretty painless to take this anywhere. It is one of the most compact 15-inch laptops. It's 4.5 pounds as configured here. That's nice. It's built like a tank. It's very rigid. It's very strong. I have not scratched this thing once. Looks as good as the day I got it, except for a couple of fingerprints. The interior does still love fingerprints. One thing I have discovered is the trackpad rather. When we first reviewed this, we were so enamored with the trackpad. It's a Microsoft Precision trackpad, and it just didn't stink. Now there's a lot of Windows laptops that have very good trackpads. This is no longer the very best, but it's still pretty good. But this gets gummy. Even if you don't really notice it, you'll see the fingerprint oils on it, but clean it. Clean it every once in a while. Damp cloth, a little soft soap, and your trackpad will work better. Trust me on that one. So needs a little TLC there. Interior carbon fiber, as ever, does show dirt. Keyboard. I have not warmed up to this. Now, usually with the keyboard, if you spend a lot of time typing on it, you'll adjust. The short travel for a 15-inch laptop is a little strange, and there's a lack of comfortable damping. So when you hit the bottom, you really hit the bottom, and I've not used this as my go-to machine for writing as a result. The display, lovely. And you know, I know a lot of you love the 4K option, particularly sharp IGZO, as is the 1080p non-touch, non-glare one that we have here. The 1080p one is still in some ways my favorite because it is easier to color calibrate. The 4K display, as you know, has driven me crazy. Remove Dell Premiere Color, which has all the color presets. Use a colorimeter if you're doing this for professional photo and video work, and you'll get something closer to a good calibration. However, the 4K display just has a very, very high hardware white point, and it can be a challenge if you want to do video and photo production and have something that actually resembles what most people are going to end up seeing with a more normal white point display with less color gamut too. Windows still doesn't handle high color gamut real well and real accurately. That's something that Mac OS actually does a little bit better job of. Battery life on the 4K touchscreen model, which I think a lot of you are considering because it's one of the things that makes it real special, isn't it? It's about 6 hours, and that has been consistent. It has not degraded over time, even loading a lot of software on it. And thermals, it does get toasty. You know, it's not the only thin and light metal laptop now with the NVIDIA GTX 960M, but this one gets a little toastier because it is one of the smallest. There's less room for heat dissipation here, that's all. It doesn't get burning hot compared to, say, the MSI GS60, the Ghost Pro. I mean, that one will singe the hairs off your legs. This will not, but it'll just get a little uncomfortable over here. Spread your legs. I know what you're thinking. Don't think that. Or use a lap cooler. That's my solution here. The Samsung Notebook 9 Pro we recently reviewed stays cooler, but aha, it has the NVIDIA GTX 950M. A little bit lower graphics card can make a difference there for thermals. The Asus ZenBook UX 501 Pro is still one of the budget-appealing alternatives as well. That one's a cooler because it's also thicker. It helps. Speaking of price, this is really expensive. So, you know, folks expect a lot from it, and it's fair. Again, like Surface Book, it's an expensive kind of product. Now, the base model starts really cheap. That's probably the one that almost nobody's going to buy. It doesn't even have the dedicated graphics and a lot of the things that make this pretty cool. If you want the 4K with an SSD inside, it's going to cost you around $2,000. You get 16 gigs of RAM for that, which is pretty nice. 256 gig SSD, PCIe, so that's nice. And PCIe speeds have been kind of all over the place, and that's also an issue with the drivers on this. I hate to say it, but Mac OS has been handling that better and getting more predictable performance. But things are getting better here. PCIe is still faster than SATA 3. Will you notice the difference? I don't know. I think, you know, you feel better because you got the faster technology. It's more forward-thinking, more than it's making your life better the way, say, a high-quality display does. Dell gets kudos, speaking of carrying it around, for having one of the most compact, it's also really styling, chargers I've ever seen. This is a 130-watt adapter that's smaller than just about anybody else's, so that's a plus too. If you get something like the ZenBook, you're going to get a chunkier adapter on. Even if you get the Samsung Notebook 9 Pro, they're good at making svelte chargers, but theirs is chunkier than this as well. As to whether this is worth more than the competition, considering it is by far the most expensive, unless you're considering the 15-inch Retina MacBook Pro, which is $2,000 to $2,500. I leave that up to you, and I said this in our Notebook 9 Pro review that I might lean a little bit more towards the Notebook 9 Pro if I wanted thin, light, stylish, but still very powerful, because it's $1,399 versus $2,000. For $2,000, it ought to make the bed for me in the morning. You know what I mean? But it is very compact, it is light, it has a great screen, it's very fast. Once you get used to quad-core, it's really hard going back. Those quad-core CPUs make everything feel quicker, get done faster, and I'm a heavy multitasker. I like that a lot. I would pick this over the Asus ZenBook Pro if money was available, because it does, both displays, the 1080p and the 4K, are just better looking than what Asus is using in their latest generation and even in the previous generation display. And the speakers on the Asus are just very anemic and tinny. Now this has tinny speakers, but they're loud at least, so you can hear darn well with these. And with the Notebook 9 Pro, the problem is the RAM is soldered on board. 8 gigs is all you get. For those of you who use a lot of VMs, you know you need lots of memory. The Dell is a great option, and it actually has 2 RAM slots. It's pretty easy. Torx T5 screwdriver, take this off. You have access to your SSD, you have access to your 2 RAM slots, you got your socketed wireless card, so it's an easy machine to work on should you need to replace the battery in the future too. And there's the versatility for those who actually prefer a spinning conventional hard drive for its higher capacities. There's an XPS available with that too. But you're going to get the smaller battery with that, so that's a real, because there's not enough room for the big battery and the hard drive. So there you have it. 6 months later, it's still a lovely machine. It's no longer possessed by demons. The drivers have been fixed on this. It works well. Is it worth the high price? If you want the upgradability, the top line specs, this is going to be still the one. I'm Lisa from Mobile Tech Review. Be sure to watch our original review of this, read our written review, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more cool tech videos.